The room went quiet so fast I could hear the air conditioning click. The wedding march was still playing soft, expensive when I stepped out from a service door at the back of the ballroom and said, steady and clear, "Hold on. He hasn't even paid the deposit for this party." Every head turned. Crystal chandeliers glittered over satin chairs and champagne flutes. The MC froze mid-smile. My ex-husband, Darius Cole, stood on the stage in a charcoal suit like he'd been built for photos. His fiancée, Brielle, the girl in white, blinked hard, like her brain couldn't process the words. People think revenge is loud. They picture a woman shaking, crying, throwing a drink. But inside my body, it wasn't loud. It felt like stepping out of a dark house into sunlight. It felt quiet. If you've ever been forced to a crossroads you never asked for, divorce, betrayal, starting over when you're supposed to already know better, stay with me right now. And tell me in the comments what state you're listening from, because I promise you, one calm sentence can change an entire room. Now let me take you back to the real beginning. September 2025. Charlotte, North Carolina. A short time before that ballroom, I was standing on the stone steps of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse with a thin folder pressed to my chest. The papers inside were still warm from my hands, and the clerk's stamped divorce decree, final and official, like a door locking behind me. A breeze slid right through my coat. I was cold on the outside, but inside my chest something burned steady, like a pilot light that refused to go out. 20 years, that's how long he'd been Mrs. Darius Cole. 20 years of keeping the lights on, the fridge full, the bills paid, the holidays handled, and the peace protected. 20 years of telling myself, this is marriage, you bend, you compromise, you don't make a scene. And then one day, you realize the peace has been bought with your dignity. Darius walked ahead of me across the courthouse plaza like he couldn't wait to escape. He didn't look back. He didn't ask if I was okay. He moved like a man late for something important, something shiny. At the curb, a black SUV waited with the engine running. The windows were tinted, but I caught the flash of a pink coat in the passenger seat. Brielle, the woman who had been living in the corners of my marriage like a shadow I wasn't allowed to name. Darius opened the driver's door, slid in, and pulled away without rolling down the window. No goodbye. No thank you for 20 years. No apology. And the part that still surprises me, I didn't scream. I didn't chase him. I didn't fall apart on those courthouse steps. I just stood there and listened to my own breathing. It wasn't relief. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. Cold, clean clarity. Like somebody finally turned the lights on and I could see the whole room. The lies, the patterns, the way it'd been trained to swallow everything and call it love. I walked down the steps and my phone was already in my hand. Darius liked to call himself a businessman. Construction supplies, invoices, promises. He told everyone he was self-made. He told me the business needed liquidity, that money was always moving, always tied up, always one deal away from being bigger. 2 years earlier, he came home with his charm turned up and said, "Imani, help me out. My credit can't take another hit. If you open the main credit card in your name, we can run expenses clean. I'll pay it, I swear." I believed him because believing him meant my life still made sense, so I opened the main card under my name. Then he asked for supplementary cards. "One for me," he said. "One for my sister Keisha, so she can handle Mom's errands. Maybe one for Mom too. It'll make everything easier." I remember sitting at our kitchen table with the application papers spread out like a harmless little project. I remember how normal it felt to say yes. I remember thinking, this is what a supportive wife does. 15 supplementary cards. 15, not just for him, his sister, and his mother, but for cousins and business buddies and people whose names I barely knew. Darius made it sound generous, practical, like I was being a real partner. What I was really doing was handing over my name, my credit, my peace. Standing outside that courthouse, with the divorce decree still warm in my folder, a thought landed in my stomach like a stone. During the marriage, I had been the bridge. After the marriage, I didn't have to be. I slid my thumb across my phone screen, not frantic, not shaking, just steady. The banking app opened. The login page blinked back at me like an old friend. My finger hovered for 1 second, not because I doubted myself, because I knew that once I pressed the next button, there would be no going back to the version of me who kept swallowing everything to keep other people comfortable. I took a breath, the kind you take before you step onto a stage, and I tapped cards. If you're still here with me, hit like, subscribe, and comment "I'm still listening," because what happened next is where the story truly begins. I tapped Manage Supplementary Cards, and the screen filled with a neat list, 15 lines, each one ending in 4 digits I knew too well. It's strange what you remember when you've been paying attention for years without realizing it. I knew which card Keisha used for those quick runs that always turned into shopping bags. I knew which one Darius used for dinners he claimed were client meetings. I even recognized the card his mother, Loretta, kept in her purse, like it was a family heirloom. Every one of them had the same status beside it: active. That word sat there like a quiet insult. Not because I minded helping family. I had done that for 2 decades. It'd been the one who bought school supplies when nobody else remembered. It'd been the one who slipped cash into a birthday card so nobody felt embarrassed. It'd been the one who made sure Loretta had groceries when her pension didn't stretch far enough. But there's a line between generosity and being used, and I had been living on the wrong side of that line for a long time. My thumb hovered over the first card. Just 1 second. I didn't feel anger, not the kind people expect. No fireball. No trembling hands. What I felt was something colder and cleaner, like a surgeon's calm before an incision. I pressed the card that belonged to Darius first, the one he called his lucky numbers. He used to joke about it, flashing the last 4 digits like they meant something. "This one's my charm," he'd say, grinning. "Everything goes right when I swipe this." What he never said was what he swiped it for. Last month, that same card bought Brielle Sutton a designer handbag that cost more than my first car payment. I remember because the notification popped up while I was standing in the produce aisle at Harris Teeter, comparing the price of apples like my life depended on it. I had stared at the screen and thought, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's fraud. Then I looked at the timestamp, the location, the boutique name, and I knew. Back then, I swallowed it. I swallowed it the way women swallow things every day, because it's easier than starting a war you're not ready to finish. But I wasn't swallowing anymore. I hit cancel. A confirmation box popped up, polite as a librarian. "Are you sure you want to cancel this supplementary card?" Yes, I was sure. I tapped confirm, and the app responded instantly. "The supplementary card ending in 2714 has been successfully canceled. This card can no longer be used." For a moment, I just looked at that sentence. Not because I needed to read it twice, but because it felt unreal, like watching a heavy chain fall off your ankle and hearing it clatter on the ground. A gust of wind rushed up the courthouse steps and lifted the edge of my folder. The paper inside fluttered like it was trying to breathe. I took another breath too. Then I moved to the next card, and the next, 15 times, my thumb did the same motion. Tap, cancel, confirm. Each cancellation sent a little vibration through my phone. Some people would call it a notification. To me, it sounded like a door locking, a boundary being drawn, a life-changing shape. Halfway through, I realized something that made my throat tighten, not with sadness, but with a kind of sharp disbelief. I had been afraid to leave, afraid to divorce, afraid of being alone, but I had never been afraid to protect everybody else. I had protected Darius' image, his businessman persona, his mother's pride, his sister's comfort. I had protected the family story so hard I almost disappeared inside it. Now, I was finally protecting myself. When I canceled the last card, the screen refreshed, and the word active vanished from every line like a lie being erased. My phone buzzed one more time, one last confirmation. 15 supplementary cards. Gone. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket, tucked the folder under my arm, and started walking toward the parking deck. My steps were slow, not because I was tired, but because for once I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was walking into my own life. I hadn't even reached my car when WhatsApp chimed. It was Tasha Reed. If you've got a friend like Tasha, you already know she doesn't do small talk when something big is happening. Tasha is the kind of woman who walks into a room and the air changes. She's loud when she needs to be, soft when it matters, and loyal in a way that makes you feel held up from underneath. Her voice note started playing in my ear before I even sat down. "Imani," she said, and her voice was bright, almost breathless. "I got something you need to hear. Like, right now." I leaned against the concrete pillar beside my car and listened. One of my regular customers, remember the lady who always comes into my shop and acts like she's shopping for a magazine shoot? Yeah, her sister runs events at the Ritz. And guess who she saw today? My stomach didn't drop, it didn't flip, it just went still. Darius, Tasha continued, your ex-husband, he was in there booking an engagement party with this young girl. Baby, he kept saying it had to be lavish. He kept saying $75,000. $75,000 for September 18th. He was acting like money grows out of his pockets. For a second, I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt, because it fit. It fit every quiet suspicion it had, every late-night excuse, every client dinner. Every time he insisted the business needed more money, but somehow his life kept getting shinier while mine got smaller. I opened my eyes and stared at the gray parking deck wall like it was a movie screen. I pictured him standing in a luxury hotel, talking big. I pictured Brielle smiling beside him in something tight and bright, soaking up the attention like sunlight. And I pictured the moment soon when the hotel would ask for the deposit. I pressed the record button inside my mind, the way ID pressed cancel on my phone. A thought came over me, calm as winter. He can plan whatever dream he wants, but he can't use my name to pay for it anymore. I tapped the microphone icon and sent Tasha a voice note back. My tone surprised even me. Thank you, I said softly. That's exactly what I needed to know. Then I paused, just long enough for my next words to land. He won't even be able to pay the deposit. I could hear Tasha inhale on the other end when she listened. She knew my voice. She knew when I was upset, and she knew when I was done. Imani, she said, sending another message. This one typed fast. Are you okay? I stared down at my hands. They were steady. No shaking. No white knuckles. I was okay in a way I hadn't been in a long time. I'm not falling apart, I typed back. I'm putting things back where they belong. Because that's what this was. People love to call it revenge, but that word always sounds messy to me, like a drink thrown in a face, like shouting in a parking lot. This wasn't messy, this was order. This was a woman finally recognizing the difference between love and access. I started my car and pulled out of the parking deck into Charlotte traffic. The city moved around me like it always had, people rushing, lights changing, horns tapping like impatience. But inside my car, it was quiet. I passed a little street vendor near the corner, the kind who sets up a folding table and sells roasted nuts in paper cones. The smell cut through my thoughts, warm, sweet, familiar. My body slowed down before my brain even decided. I pulled over. The vendor was an older man with kind eyes and a knit cap pulled low. He scooped honey-roasted pecans into a bag and handed them to me like it was nothing. But when I took the warm bag into my hands, something in my chest softened. Not into sadness. Into tenderness. For myself. For the woman who had spent 20 years making sure everybody else felt warm while she stayed cold. I sat in my car for a moment with the bag in my lap, feeling the heat seep into my palms, and I made myself a promise that didn't need to be dramatic to be true. From now on, I will live for me. I drove home to Plaza Midwood with that sentence playing in my head like a steady beat. I carried the divorce folder inside and set it on the kitchen counter. I poured fresh water into my old cat's bowl and watched him pad over, calm and trusting, like the world wasn't full of people who take too much. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my phone buzzed again, this time, not WhatsApp. A text from Darius. Just one line. What did you do? I stared at it. And I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the thing about drawing a boundary is this. The moment you set it, the people who benefited from you having none will come running, and I could already hear the footsteps coming. I left Darius' text sitting on my screen like a dead bug. I didn't feel like flicking away. What did you do? He already knew. Men like him always know the moment the power shifts. They feel it in their bones, like a thermostat changing in a house they thought they owned. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and took a slow breath. The warm bag of honey-roasted pecans I'd bought earlier was still on the table, the sweetness rising up every time I moved. My old cat rubbed against my ankle, calm and hungry, like nothing in the world could be urgent enough to interrupt dinner. I started washing a couple of plates, mostly to keep my hands busy. Not because I was nervous, because I was training myself to stay steady. The first bang hit my front door so hard, my cat jerked and disappeared under the sofa. Then another. Then, another, rapid and angry, like somebody was trying to break their way back into my life. A woman's voice followed, sharp as a siren. "Imani, open this door right now." I didn't jump. I didn't rush. I dried my hands on a dish towel, walked to the entryway, and looked through the peephole. Keisha Cole, Darius' little sister. She stood on my porch with her weight pitched forward like she owned the steps. Big hoop earrings, loud perfume, bright lipstick, and a purse that swung at her side like a trophy. I recognized it immediately, one of the bags bought with one of my supplementary cards. I'd seen it in a photo on her social media, sitting on the hood of her car like the purse was the point of the picture, not the person. She banged again. "Girl, don't play with me. Open up." I kept my voice even, speaking through the closed door. "Who is it?" There was a pause, like she couldn't believe I'd made her say her own name. Then her voice rose. "Who do you think it is?" "Keisha. And you need to fix whatever mess you made. My brother is over at the Ritz looking like a fool." I could picture it. Darius standing in a marble lobby, swiping card after card, watching the hotel staff's polite smiles turn tight and professional. I could almost hear his voice dropping into that fake calm he used when he was trying to control panic. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door partway, just enough to make it clear I wasn't afraid, but not enough to invite her into my space. Keisha didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me like I was a curtain, not a person, and walked straight into my living room. That right there told me everything. People who respect you don't enter your house like they're raiding it. She dropped her purse on my coffee table. The metal chain smacked the wood and made a harsh little ring. My cat stayed hidden under the sofa. Keisha turned on me with her hands on her hips. "Have you lost your mind?" Darius called me. He tried to pay the deposit for his party, and none of the cards worked. The hotel manager told him the primary cardholder canceled everything. "You really did that?" I crossed my arms. "Yes." She blinked, like she'd expected me to deny it out of fear. "So what, you think that's cute? Those cards been in use for years. Years. Me too. I had things I was about to buy this week. You can't just cut them off like that." Her tone was so confident, so offended. It almost would have been funny if it hadn't been so familiar. The entitlement wasn't new. It was just louder now that the faucet had been turned off. I walked past her, down the short hallway to my office, and pulled a folder from the bottom drawer. I didn't keep it because I was paranoid. I kept it because somewhere deep inside me, I knew I was going to need proof one day. I brought it back and set it on the table with a soft thud. "Read," I said. Keisha leaned down and scanned the page, lips moving a little as she tried to make sense of legal language. Then she snapped her head up. "This is old. Darius told me he changed it a long time ago. He told me those cards were basically his." I didn't argue with her feelings. I didn't debate her loyalty to her brother. I simply pulled my phone out, opened the banking app again, and held the screen in front of her face. "Look," I said. "Primary cardholder. Me." Her eyes flicked across the screen. For a second, her confidence wavered. Then she snapped back into anger like it was a jacket she wore to feel powerful. "You doing this on purpose?" she said, voice rising. "He trying to start a new life, and you over here sabotaging him." That word sabotaging hit something in me, because that's what they always called it when I stopped giving. Sabotage. Bitter. Harsh. Crazy. Never boundary. Never self-respect. Never the consequences of your choices. I kept my voice calm, but there was steel in it now. He started a new life while we were still married. He was buying gifts, booking parties, playing husband somewhere else. He wasn't thinking about my dignity when he did that. Keisha scoffed. "That's between y'all. But you know what hell go through? The embarrassment? In front of people?" I held her gaze. "And what about the embarrassment I lived with for years? When I was stretching groceries and he was spending like he had no home? When I was keeping the business afloat and he was moving money around like I was too stupid to notice?" Keisha took a step closer, her voice sharpening. "You better watch how you talk. You don't want problems with this family." Her hand drifted toward the glass picture frame on the side table. Not even subtle. The old me would have rushed in to calm her down. The old me would have begged, "Please, don't do this, we can talk." But I wasn't the old me. I pointed toward the front door. "Don't even think about it." Keisha froze. I continued, slow and clear. "If you break anything in this house, I call the police, and when they show up, we'll let them decide what the crime is, me canceling my own cards, or you trespassing and threatening me. And if you want the neighbors watching, I can open the curtains and give them a front row seat. That's what boundaries are sometimes. Not yelling, not cursing. Just letting somebody know the line is real and you're willing to enforce it. Keisha's nostrils flared. Her pride wanted to keep fighting, but her eyes flicked toward the window like she suddenly remembered that this was a neighborhood full of people who noticed things. She snatched her purse off the table. "You gonna regret this?" she hissed. "I'm telling Mama." "Okay," I said. "Tell her." Keisha stormed out and slammed my door so hard the picture on the wall shifted crooked. I stood there for a moment, listening to the echo fade. My cat didn't move. I crouched down beside the sofa and spoke softly, as if he were the only soul in the world who deserved comfort. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here." Then I straightened up and looked at the door. Because I already knew, Keisha was just the first wave. When you stop being useful, people don't come asking kindly, they come demanding, they come trying to scare you back into your old place. I wiped the coffee table, straightened the crooked frame, and put the folder back in my office drawer. My hands didn't shake, but my body felt alert, like it had been trained by years of walking on eggshells. 30 minutes later, the knock came again. This time it wasn't banging, it was controlled, measured, like a judge's gavel. My stomach tightened not with fear, but with recognition. Loretta Cole, Darius' mother. Her voice floated through the door before I even touched the lock. "Baby, open up. It's me." Keisha told me she came earlier and things got heated. "I'm here so we can talk calmly." Calmly. That word always meant one thing with Loretta. I'm going to speak softly while I try to bend you into a shape I like. I opened the door. Loretta stepped in without waiting, wearing a dark green coat. I'd bought her 2 winters ago because Shed mentioned being cold. A gray head wrap sat tight around her hair. In her hand, she carried a cloth bag heavy enough to thump when she set it on the coffee table. A few apples rolled out and bumped across my clean floor. She didn't notice. Or she didn't care. Loretta lowered herself onto my sofa like she was taking her rightful seat, and she patted the cushion beside her. "Come sit," she said. "We need to talk like grown women." I didn't sit next to her. I pulled a chair from the dining area and placed it across from her, facing her straight on. I sat with my hands on my knees. Loretta looked at me for a moment, the way a person looks at a locked door they're used to walking through. Then she sighed deep, heavy, dramatic. "Imani," she began, "Darius made a mistake. I'm not saying he didn't, but you and my son were together 20 years. 20. There's still something there, isn't there? How could you cut him off like this? Those cards have been used for years. You know he needs to keep an image. People are watching." I blinked slowly. People watched me too. Loretta frowned like she hadn't expected a response that didn't come with apology. "You know what I mean," she said, voice tightening. "A man's reputation matters in business. Hez planning a future, and you." She shook her head, disappointed like I was a child. "You're trying to embarrass him." I leaned forward slightly. "He embarrassed himself." Loretta's lips pressed together. "Don't talk like that." I held her gaze. "Those cards are in my name. I canceled them. That's not cruel. That's me taking back what belongs to me." Loretta's eyes narrowed, and the softness drained out of her face in a way I recognized immediately. The real Loretta always arrived eventually. "And what about family?" she asked. "What about loyalty? You were my daughter-in-law. You had duties." There it was. Duty. The word they use when they want you to keep suffering quietly. I stood up and walked to my office. I didn't rush. I didn't slam drawers. I moved like someone who had decided she wasn't going to be talked into silence anymore. I returned with another folder thicker, heavier, more personal. Receipts, ledgers, printouts, transfers, dates and amounts that told the truth better than any argument ever could. I placed it on the table. "Since we're talking about duty," I said, "let's talk about what I've done." Loretta stared at the papers like they were something dirty. I pointed to one receipt. "Last winter I had a fever over 102. I asked your son to bring me medicine. He said he was busy." I tapped another page. "That same day he sent money to Brielle." Loretta looked away and waved her hand. "That could be anything." One little transfer becomes a life. I cut in, still calm. And it wasn't one. I flipped to the business ledger. This business started with money from my side of the family. I kept the books, I handled inventory. I worked that store like it was my second heartbeat. Loretta's mouth tightened. I continued, voice steady. He moved $75,000 from our joint money. Quietly. Without my consent. That isn't a mistake, Loretta. That's theft dressed up as marriage. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Not fear of me. Fear of proof. She swallowed hard and tried to reclaim her authority. Imani, I'm telling you right now. Reactivate those cards. My son is stressed. If something happens to him, that'll be on you. I let that sit for a beat. Then I said softly, responsible? I shook my head once. No, Hez responsible. Loretta's face flushed red, then pale. And when she realized she couldn't bully me back into place with her voice, she reached for her oldest weapon. She slid off the sofa and dropped onto the floor. Right there on my rug, she slapped her knees and started wailing loud enough to carry down the street. Oh Lord, look at my life. Look how this woman is treating me. Neighbors, come see. I stared at her for a long moment, this grown woman, using noise to try to force me into surrender. Then I walked to the front door. And I opened it. Not a crack. Wide. The evening light spilled in. The air smelled like somebody grilling down the block. I looked down at Loretta and said, clear as daylight. If you want the neighbors, I'll invite them. Let them decide what's happening here. Let them hear about adultery. Let them hear about marital money being taken. Let them hear why the cards were canceled. Loretta's crying stopped like a radio getting switched off. Her eyes darted toward the open doorway, toward the possibility of witnesses. Because deep down, even Loretta knew, shame works both ways. Slowly, she pushed herself up, dusted off her coat, and glared at me like I'd betrayed the entire family by refusing to be their cushion anymore. You've gotten bold, she said, voice low. You think you've grown wings. I didn't smile. I didn't argue. I simply said, I've grown boundaries. Loretta grabbed her cloth bag, stepped toward the door, and as she passed me, she shoved my shoulder small, sharp, deliberate. I didn't stumble. I didn't react. I just watched her walk out. When the door closed behind her, I locked it. Then I stood there in the quiet for a moment, listening to my own breathing again. The cat crept out from under the sofa and rubbed against my leg, cautious but trusting. I bent down and stroked his head. I know, I whispered. That was loud. Then I straightened and looked at my phone on the counter. Because the truth was simple. Keisha and Loretta were just the messengers. The real storm was still out there, and I knew Darius Cole would call next. Darius called the next morning at 7:18 a.m. I know the exact time because I stared at the glowing numbers on my stove clock while the phone vibrated against the counter. The sky outside my kitchen window was still a soft gray blue, that in-between color that makes everything look quieter than it really is. My cat sat on the rug near my feet, tail flicking once, as if he could feel the tension before I even picked up the phone. I didn't answer right away. I poured myself a glass of water, took one slow sip, and set the glass down with care. Then I slid my phone across the counter, tapped the little record icon, and watched the red dot appear. That dot was my new kind of security. Only then did I pick up. Imani, Darius' voice came through sharp and loud, already halfway to a shout. I could hear street noise behind him, car horns, the distant rumble of traffic, a man in motion. What the hell did you do? I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice calm. Good morning to you too. Don't do that, he snapped. Don't play cute. Did you cancel the cards? All of them? Yes, I said. There was a beat of silence on the line, short, stunned, and then he exploded. Do you have any idea what you just did to me? He shouted. I was at the Ritz in front of people, Imani. People who matter. They looked at me like I was nothing. You swiped away my reputation in 1 second. My cat flinched at his volume and pressed himself against my ankle. I reached down and stroked his head, slow and steady, as if calming him could also calm the shaking echoes of my old life. You're worried about your reputation, I said evenly. I'm worried about my name. My name was on those cards, Darius said, voice thick with outrage. I've used them for years. They were basically mine. I let that sit for half a second, because it was so honest it almost felt like a confession. Basically, I repeated softly. That's the word. Basically yours. But legally mine. You did it on purpose, he said. You can't stand seeing me happy. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Darius, you booked a $75,000 engagement party for your girlfriend the same day we finalized our divorce. If you want to talk about happiness, start there. He tried to cut in, but I kept going, my voice still calm. And you bought her a designer bag with one of those cards. You bought jewelry. You moved money around like I was too stupid to notice. You weren't thinking about my happiness when you were doing that. Stop bringing her into this, he snapped, and his voice shifted less rage, more panic. You're trying to make me look like the bad guy. You are the bad guy, I said, still not raising my voice. You just got used to me pretending you weren't. For a moment, he didn't speak. I could hear his breathing. Then his tone dropped into something darker. Listen, he said, slow, threatening. Reactivate those cards, right now, or you're going to regret it. There it was. Not sadness, not remorse, control. I glanced at the red recording dot on my screen. It blinked like a steady heartbeat. If you threaten me again, I said, I'll call the police. He laughed, a hard sound. Police? You think they care about a bitter ex-wife? We're divorced, Imani. Asset division is done. You don't have a case. You don't have anything. You've got scraps of paper and feelings. Actually, I said, I have records, receipts, ledgers, transfers, and now I have this call. He went quiet again, just long enough for me to hear the shift, the moment he realized he was talking to a version of me he didn't understand anymore. Then he tried a new angle, softer but still manipulative. Imani, he said, we were together 20 years. 20! You really want to do this? You really want to drag my name through the mud? I looked around my kitchen, the clean counters, the quiet cat, the morning light. This little life I had been holding together while he treated our marriage like a convenience. Darius, I said, your name isn't in the mud because of me. It's in the mud because you put it there. His voice rose again, angry and scared at the same time. You think you're big now because you canceled some cards? My mother told me if you don't fix this, we'll come to your neighborhood every day. Well, tell everybody what kind of woman you are. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. Then come, I said. He sucked in a breath. What? Come, I repeated, colder now. If you show up to harass me, I call 911. And then the neighbors won't just know your version of me. The police will hear my version of you. The line went silent for 3 seconds. Then I heard a dull thud like head hit his phone against something, followed by a string of curses. You witch, he hissed. I should have known. You think you can win? This isn't over. And then he hung up. I stared at my screen for a moment, listening to the quiet return. My cat stepped away and rubbed against my shin as if to remind me I was still here, still safe, still standing. I saved the recording with a simple name, Darius Threat Call. Then I uploaded it to the cloud. That was the thing about becoming a woman with boundaries. You stop relying on hope, and you start relying on proof. 2 hours later, I met Tasha outside a small office building just off Tryon Street. It wasn't some glossy high-rise where attorneys wore suits that cost more than rent. It was a modest place with clean windows and a quiet lobby that smelled faintly like coffee and printer paper. Tasha waved at me the moment she saw me. She wore a bright jacket she always wore color like she was daring the world to dim her. In one hand she carried 2 breakfast sandwiches wrapped in foil. Eat, she said, pressing one into my palm. Don't go in there hungry. You're going to have to talk. I took a bite, and the simple warmth of it steadied me. Tasha watched my face carefully. You good? She asked. I'm steady, I said. And I meant it. We walked into the office, and a receptionist pointed us down the hall. Attorney Malcolm Price stood when we entered. He looked like a man who didn't waste words. Early 40s, glasses, calm eyes, a suit that fit without trying too hard. He shook my hand firmly, then Tasha's, then gestured for us to sit. Miss Carter, he said, polite and professional. Tell me what's going on. I placed my briefcase on his desk and unlatched it. The sound of the clasps snapping open made me feel strangely powerful, like I'd been carrying a story nobody believed, and now I was about to lay it out in black and white. Inside were folders neatly labeled: household receipts, business ledger, bank transfers, credit card statements, screenshots, recordings. I slid them across the desk. Malcolm didn't rush. He didn't skim like he was trying to get to the good part. He went through the papers slowly, methodically, the way a person reads a map before a long drive. The only sound in the room was paper turning. Tasha sat beside me, quiet for once, her knee bouncing slightly with contained anger. I watched Malcolm's face as he read. He underlined lines, he circled dates, he made small notes in the margins. Every now and then, he'd pause and look at a page longer than the others, as if to confirm what his instincts were already telling him. I didn't realize how tense I was until my shoulders started to ache. I forced myself to breathe. In through my nose, out through my mouth. After about 30 minutes, Malcolm placed the last page down and removed his glasses. He looked at me directly. "You've kept very thorough documentation," he said. Something in my chest loosened. "Especially this business ledger," he continued, tapping the folder lightly. "This is not just helpful, it's significant." I swallowed. "Significant how?" He flipped to a page and pointed. "You said he diverted $75,000. According to these books, between May and October of last year, Mr. Cole made 5 transfers into his personal account, $15,000 each. He said the numbers like they were facts, not accusations. "Those transfers happened while you were still married," he continued. "That matters. In most cases, money earned or saved during marriage is marital property. One spouse moving it unilaterally, especially in anticipation of divorce, is a problem." My palms warmed against my thighs. "So, I can get it back?" Malcolm nodded once. "Yes. Based on what you've shown me, you have a strong path to recovery." Tasha exhaled loudly beside me, like she'd been holding her breath since the courthouse. Malcolm held up a finger. "Let me be clear. It isn't automatic, but your evidence is strong." He flipped to another section. "In addition to the $75,000, I also see multiple smaller transfers, $700, $1,200, $1,500, in total, over $7,000. Those should be included." I blinked. Even I hadn't added them all up. "And these credit card statements," he continued, "if we can show expenditures were for a third-party gifts, travel, luxury items, then those may also be argued as dissipation of marital assets." Hearing the phrase dissipation of marital assets felt like hearing my pain translated into a language the law recognized. Not drama, not bitterness, a thing that had a name. I leaned forward. "What happens next?" Malcolm's tone stayed calm, but it sharpened with strategy. "Next, we need full account information. His personal account, any hidden accounts, and the account he transferred money to Miss Sutton, you said?" I nodded. "Brielle." I found her account number in messages, and I wrote down Darius' personal account number once when I saw it on his phone. Malcolm's eyebrows lifted slightly. "That helps." He paused, thinking, "We can file a request for discovery. Depending on the circumstances, we may obtain court orders requiring the bank to provide transaction records. We will also revisit the divorce decree's asset division terms. Sometimes a final division can still be challenged if there was fraud or undisclosed assets." Fraud, undisclosed, those words landed heavy. Tasha leaned in. "So he can't just move money and pretend it's gone?" "No," Malcolm said simply. "Not if we can show the trail." I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a deep sadness for the woman I'd been, the one who used to think love was enough protection. I cleared my throat. "We have a house," I said. "Bought it together after we got married, both names. The car is in his name. He always told me there weren't savings because everything was in the business, but now I don't believe that." Malcolm nodded. "House and car are marital assets. The court will not ignore them. And if there are hidden funds, bank statements often reveal patterns." He looked at me over his desk. "Has he threatened you?" I hesitated for half a second. Then I opened my phone and played the beginning of the recorded call. Darius' voice filled the quiet office, angry, controlling, entitled. Malcolm held up his hand after a few seconds. "That's enough. Save it. Back it up. Do not engage him without recording or witnesses." I nodded. "I have it in the cloud." "Good," he said. Tasha reached over and squeezed my hand. "See?" she whispered. "I told you." Malcolm slid the folders back toward me. "I'm going to prepare paperwork to start this process," he said. You've done the hardest part already, collecting proof. And right there, something changed inside me. Because for years, I had been carrying shame like it was mine. Like I had failed at marriage, failed at being a wife, failed at holding my family together. But Malcolm wasn't looking at me like a failure. He was looking at me like a person with a case. When we left his office, the sun was higher and the air felt warmer. Charlotte moved around us, cars, pedestrians, busy sidewalks, like life didn't pause for heartbreak. Tasha hooked her arm through mine. "We're gonna get your money back," she said. "And we're gonna get your peace back too." I wanted to believe her. But belief wasn't enough anymore. As we walked toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. A notification from a social media app. Friend request, Brielle Sutton. I stopped walking. Tasha turned. "What is it?" I stared at the profile picture. Heavy makeup, glossy lips, a diamond ring held up toward the camera like a billboard. Underneath, a message. "I'm Darius' fiancé. Accept me, I have something to tell you." I didn't feel rage. I felt something else. A calm, careful curiosity. Because when a woman like Brielle reaches out first, it usually means one thing. Somebody's story is cracking. And if you're still listening, stay right here, because the next message she sent me was the kind that makes your stomach go cold, even when your hands are steady. I stood in the parking lot outside Malcolm Price's office with my phone in my hand, staring at that friend request like it was a knock on my door. Brielle Sutton. Profile photo. Glossy lips, heavy lashes, and a diamond ring held up toward the camera like proof of victory. Under her name, one short message. "I'm Darius' fiancé. Accept me. I have something to tell you." Tasha leaned in beside me, squinting at the screen. "Oh, she's bold," she muttered. "She's real bold." I didn't feel anger. Not the hot kind, anyway. My anger had already burned down to something quieter, something more useful. I felt curiosity. The kind that comes when you've been lied to for so long that you can spot a crack in somebody else's story from across the street. I hit accept. The moment I did, messages started pouring in like she'd been waiting, with her finger hovering over send. First came photos. A wide shot of a ballroom with chandeliers so bright they looked like frozen fireworks. A banner in the background read "Happily Ever After," no names yet, just the promise of them. Then a selfie of Brielle in a white dress, the train spilling across the floor like she was already practicing being the center of attention. She held up her left hand, that ring flashing. Then a picture of her and Darius together, his arm wrapped tight around her waist, both of them smiling in front of what looked like a printed menu board. And finally, the text message that told me exactly who she was trying to be in my life. "This is where Darius and I are celebrating our engagement. He's spending $75,000. My wedding dress is designer and costs over $20,000. The ring is $18,000. He says I deserve the best. You probably never saw anything like this in 20 years. I read it once, then again, slower. There was a time when a message like that would have knocked the breath out of me. It would have made me question my worth, made me shrink, made me remember every time I stood in the kitchen wearing an old t-shirt while Darius walked out smelling like cologne and excuses. But this time, something else happened. I felt sorry. Not for her. For the version of me that used to believe appearances were proof. I sat in my car for a moment before I replied, letting my hands rest on the steering wheel. I could feel my heartbeat, steady and slow, like my body was trying to remind me, "You're safe. You're in control." Then I typed back with calm that probably irritated her more than any insult. "It's a beautiful room. The dress is pretty too. Quick question, are you paying for all that, or is Darius?" Her reply came fast. "Don't be jealous. Darius has money. His business is doing amazing. You're just bitter." I stared at the screen and almost laughed. Jealousy wasn't what I felt. What I felt was the weight of 20 years of receipts. I typed again. "If his business is doing amazing, why was he swiping card after card today and none of them worked? Why did he call me desperate?" There was a pause this time, long enough for me to picture her face changing. Not from confidence to humility, but from confidence to calculation. Because women like Brielle don't like questions. Questions are how the truth gets in. She wrote, "You're lying. Darius said those cards were his. He said you canceled them out of spite. He said the divorce settled everything, so that was the story he'd sold her." I took a screenshot of her message, then another, then another. I responded once more, and this time I didn't argue with feelings. I argued with facts. Look at dates and amounts. May 15, $3,500 transferred to your account. June 28, $2,000 for bag. That was marital money. And if he had so much money, he wouldn't need cards that don't work. 2 minutes went by. Then she replied, weaker. He gave me that money because he loves me. You're divorced. Why are you still obsessed? Do you want him back? That one almost made me smile, because it revealed something about her that had nothing to do with me. She needed this to be a competition. She needed to believe she had won something, because deep down she wasn't sure what she'd actually gotten. I didn't take the bait. I wrote, I don't want him back. I want what's mine. And I'm just warning you, don't build your life on money that isn't yours. It collapses fast. That's when she turned ugly. Insults, names. The kind of words people use when they can't defend the story they've been telling themselves. I didn't respond. I just kept screenshotting everything. Then the notification popped up. Brielle Sutton removed you. I set my phone down on the passenger seat like it was a finished task, not a wound. My hands were still steady. I sent all the screenshots to Tasha and Malcolm. Tasha called within seconds. I'm Manny! She practically shouted into my ear. She really tried it. She did, I said, and my voice stayed soft. But she also gave us something. What? Tasha asked. Proof, I said, of how he's been selling stories. To her, to everyone. Tasha made a sound like she was biting back 1,000 words. Okay, listen. I got something for you too. I talked to my customer's sister, the one at the Ritz. Her name is Andre Whitfield. He runs events. Hez willing to meet. I hesitated. Is that okay? I don't want anybody losing their job because of me. Imani, Tasha said, her voice dropping into that serious tone she saved for moments like this. Andre's not doing anything illegal. Just confirming what your ex already put in writing. And he's sick of men walking into that hotel acting rich while stiffing everybody behind the scenes. I exhaled slowly. When? Tomorrow, she said. 3 o'clock. There's a tea spot near the hotel. We go in, we listen, we don't start a scene. We just get facts. That night, I didn't sleep much, not because I was afraid, because my mind kept replaying the same thought in different shapes. He was planning a future on top of the money he took from our past. The next morning, I went to the organic market in South End, Marlene Jackson's little shop that smelled like fresh herbs and citrus. I wasn't officially working there yet, but she'd been letting me come in to learn, to stay busy, to feel useful again. There's a special kind of healing that comes from ordinary work, stocking apples, wiping counters, listening to older customers talk about the weather and football and the price of eggs. It reminded me that life is bigger than heartbreak, even when heartbreak tries to fill the whole room. Around lunchtime, Marlene handed me a box of produce and said, "You're good with your hands, you're good with numbers, don't let anybody tell you you're starting over too late." I smiled at her, and for a moment my throat tightened, because the truth was, I had felt late to notice, late to leave, late to fight back. But standing there among oranges and greens, I realized something simple. Late is still better than never. At 2:45 p.m., Tasha picked me up. She drove with one hand on the wheel and the other waving around like she was directing traffic with her emotions. "Remember," she said, glancing at me, "we're calm, we're polite, we're just collecting." "I know," I said. We met Andre Whitfield at a quiet tea shop tucked near the hotel. He walked in wearing a crisp button-down and slacks, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in rooms with expensive carpet. He had glasses, calm eyes, and a professional smile that didn't cross into friendliness until he sat down. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Tasha told me enough. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I can't give you anything that violates policy, but I can confirm what's in the contract your ex signed. That's public between him and the venue." He reached into a folder and slid a copy across the table. My eyes went straight to the numbers. The Ritz-Carlton, Charlotte. Ballroom reservation. 50 tables. $2,000 per table. Total. $100,000 plus, with services. But underlined in bold were the negotiated line items that landed the package around the figure Darius had been bragging about, $75,000 after adjustments. Then my gaze dropped to the deposit section. Andre tapped it gently with his finger. For events of this scale, we require 20% to hold the date. That's $15,000. I swallowed. He paid it? Andre's mouth tightened, just a small change, but I noticed. He paid $7,000. Tasha let out a low whistle. So he's short. Hez short, Andre confirmed. He begged, said cash flow was tight. Promised he'd pay the remainder within a week. He didn't. A quiet satisfaction settled in my chest, not joy, not cruelty, just the steady feeling of the truth taking shape. When is the party scheduled? I asked, even though I already knew. September 18th, Andre said. 10 days from now. And if he doesn't pay? I asked. Andre's voice stayed professional. If he doesn't pay by the deadline, the event can be cancelled, and the deposit may be forfeited depending on the terms. We've already contacted him. He asked for 3 more days. Tasha leaned forward, eyes sharp. What about the guest list? Andre shook his head. Not complete, but he mentioned over 300 guests, family, friends, business associates. He requested the front tables for the bride's parents. My mind took notes the way it always had, not because I loved drama, because details are how you protect yourself. Do you have an MC? I asked. We do, Andre said. Devin Brooks, our best, experienced, professional. He paused, then added something softer. And for what it's worth, I've seen a lot of people try to buy respect with a big room and loud music. It doesn't work when the foundation is fake. I looked at him and nodded slowly. Thank you. Andre slid the folder fully toward me. Keep the contract copy. You may need it. When we left the tea shop, the sky over Charlotte was bright, almost too pretty for what was building inside my life. Tasha squeezed my arm as we walked. You see? She said. Hez not rich, Hez loud. I didn't answer right away. I was looking at the hotel entrance across the street, valets moving, people stepping out in suits and dresses, the polished version of life. Then I said quietly, Hez not planning love. Hez planning an image. That evening, Malcolm called me. His voice was calm, but there was a new edge to it, like a door had opened, and what Hed'd seen on the other side wasn't good. Imani, he said, we received preliminary information from the bank inquiry. I stood in my living room with my cat at my feet and my briefcase open on the coffee table. Yes? I said. There's more, Malcolm told me. Of the 75,000, roughly 40,000 went to Brielle Sutton through transfers and purchases. The remaining 35 appears tied to gambling-related payments. For a moment, I didn't speak. Gambling. I had suspected cheating. I had suspected financial hiding. But gambling felt like a different kind of rot, something that eats from the inside out. Malcolm continued. This matters. It establishes reckless dissipation of marital funds, and it strengthens your position. I closed my eyes for 1 second, feeling the weight of it. Then I opened them again. Send me everything, I said. I will, he replied. And one more thing, do not confront him alone. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. I won't. 2 days later, while I was wiping down the produce bins at Marlani's market, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Darius. I stepped into the back hallway, hit record, and answered. His voice came in hot, sharp, panicked, furious. What are you plotting? He hissed. I know you've been asking questions about my party. Don't you dare show up. If you set foot in that ballroom, you're going to regret it. In the background I heard a woman's voice, Brielle, complaining, crying, accusing. Their fairy tale was already cracking. I leaned my shoulder against the wall and lowered my voice on purpose, like I was intimidated. What are you talking about? I said softly. I'm working. I don't have time to worry about your party. Don't lie, he snapped. Swear you're not coming. I paused, letting silence do its work. Then I said, gentle and careful, Darius, I swear, I'm not coming. The moment those words left my mouth, I heard his breathing change, like a man who had been gripping a ledge and finally felt solid ground. Good, he said, because if you try me, I'll come up to that little store and make sure you can't work. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed small. Please don't, I just want peace. He made a satisfied sound like he believed He'd put me back where he wanted me. Then he hung up. I ended the recording, saved it, and sent it to Malcolm and Tasha. Tasha texted back almost immediately, "Girl, your acting deserves an award." I stared at my briefcase that night, laying everything out in order. Contract copy from the Ritz. Deposit details: $7,000 paid, $15,000 required. Bank statements showing transfers. Ledger pages with dates circled. Screenshots from Brielle's messages. Audio recordings: Darius threatening, Loretta wailing, Keisha barging in. I charged a power bank. I dug out an old handheld recorder as backup. I printed copies, because paper doesn't die when a phone does. And while I organized, I realized something that made my chest feel strangely calm. I wasn't preparing a scene. I was preparing a truth. 3 days left, until September 18th. 3 days until he stood under chandeliers and tried to swear loyalty with a mouthful of lies. I closed the briefcase, clicked the locks, and set it on my coffee table like a quiet promise. My cat jumped up beside it and sat down, tail curled neatly around his paws, as if he understood he was guarding something important. I ran my hand over his head and whispered, "We're almost there." Because the next time I walked into that hotel, it wouldn't be as someone's wife. It would be as the woman who finally stopped paying for her own betrayal. And if you're still listening, stay with me, because what happened in that ballroom didn't just embarrass Darius. It changed who I was allowed to be. September 18th came like a date circled in red on the calendar of my life. That morning, I dressed the way you dress when you're not trying to compete with anyone, just trying to stand steady in your own skin. A dark jacket, a simple sweater, hair neat, face clean, not soft enough to look defeated, not flashy enough to look like I came for attention. I checked my briefcase 3 times. Contract copy, deposit page highlighted, bank transfers, business ledger printouts, gambling payment proof, screenshots, audio recordings, power bank, backup recorder. My cat followed me to the door and rubbed against my ankle like he was blessing me on the way out. I bent down, scratched behind his ear, and whispered, "I'll be back." Tasha picked me up first. She had on her bold lipstick and that look in her eyes that said she would fight a hurricane for me if she had to. Then we met Malcolm in a parking lot 2 blocks from the hotel. He stood beside his car with a leather briefcase of his own copies of everything, neatly organized. When he saw me, he nodded once. Calm and ready. "Remember," he said quietly, "we're not there to scream. We're there to present." I nodded. "I'm steady." At 10:30, Andre's employee met us near a side entrance, a young woman in a hotel uniform with a staff badge clipped to her collar. She handed me a temporary staff ID and spoke softly, professional. "Mom, follow me." The director said, "You'll wait in the back until the vows." Walking through the service hallway felt like moving behind the curtain of a play. The walls were plain. The lights were bright and unromantic, but through the doors I could hear laughter and music, people celebrating a story they thought was true. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of what I was about to do. It wasn't easy to step into a room full of strangers and change the temperature. It wasn't easy to be the person who says, "Stop." But I reminded myself of the truth. I wasn't ruining love. I was stopping a lie from being dressed up as love. They sat me in a small break room behind the ballroom. Someone offered me warm water. I held the cup between my hands and breathed slowly, letting the heat sink into my palms. In the corner of the room, my briefcase sat like a quiet witness. From the other side of the wall, the music shifted. It changed from upbeat background songs to something slower and more dramatic. The wedding march. The employee returned and opened the door. "They've entered," she said. "In about 10 minutes, the MC will start the vows." I stood up, rolled my shoulders once, and loosened the zipper of my briefcase just enough to reach the papers quickly. Malcolm stood beside me like a steady wall. Tasha squeezed my hand, her grip warm and fierce. "You got this," she whispered. Then the MC's voice came through the speakers, clear, practiced, smooth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for joining us today to celebrate this beautiful couple." I took one slow breath. The employee cracked the door, and I stepped into the ballroom through the back. The room looked exactly like Brielle's pictures: chandeliers, soft lighting, white flowers, gold trim. The air smelled like perfume and expensive candles. Rows of tables were filled with guests in suits and dresses, leaning toward each other, smiling and whispering. At the front, Darius stood on the stage with Brielle beside him, her veil falling like mist over her shoulders. He looked confident, like a man who believed he was winning, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for how badly he needed to be seen as successful. Almost. The MC lifted the microphone. "Darius Cole," he said, "do you swear that for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health?" That phrase hit me like a bell. For richer or poorer. He didn't even know what it meant. I stepped forward, not fast, not dramatic, just steady enough to be unavoidable. My voice didn't shake when I spoke. "Excuse me," I said, "I need to say something before he answers." A hush fell over the room so quickly it felt like somebody had pressed mute. Darius' face changed first, his smile stiffening, his eyes widening. Brielle's hand tightened around his arm. The MC froze like his mind was searching for protocol and finding none. Darius leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "Imani, what are you doing here? You promised you wouldn't come." I looked up at him, and my voice stayed calm. "I promised you because you threatened my job," I said. "But you don't get to threaten me into silence anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the contract copy Andre had given me. I held it up high enough for the front tables to see, then I turned slightly so the room could follow. "This event," I said, "was booked for over $75,000. According to the contract, the required deposit was $15,000. I tapped the highlighted line with my finger. "He paid $7," Murmurs started, soft at first, then spreading like wind through tall grass. Brielle turned her head toward Darius, her voice trembling. "Darius, is that true? You told me it was handled." Darius' face flushed red. "She's lying," he snapped, pointing at me. "She forged that." I didn't argue. I didn't match his volume. I simply pulled out the deposit record Andre's confirmation printed and highlighted. "This shows what the hotel received," I said. "If you paid $15, show the transfer receipt. Right now." Darius reached into his pockets, then stopped. His hands hovered like he was searching for air. He had nothing. The room shifted again. You could feel it the moment people stop listening to a man's story and start watching his silence. I took out the next stack bank transfers and ledger pages. "And this," I said, "is the real reason he couldn't pay. During our marriage, he moved $75,000 of marital funds into his personal account." I paused, letting the number land. $40,000 went to Brielle. The rest went to gambling debts. Brielle's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Somebody near the middle whispered, "Gambling?" Another voice muttered, "That's why he was always short." Darius stepped forward, rage and panic colliding in his eyes. "You're trying to destroy me." I met his gaze. "No," I said, "you destroyed you. I'm just showing the receipts." And that's when the real damage happened, not from my voice, but from the crowd. A man in a navy suit stood up near the front, Raymond Ellis, one of Darius' biggest clients. He looked at Darius like he was seeing him for the first time. "I don't do business with gamblers," Raymond said loudly, "and I don't do business with men who steal from their wives." He set his napkin on the table like punctuation, then walked out. A few others followed. Chairs scraped. People avoided Darius' eyes. The ballroom that had been full of admiration began to empty like a theater after a bad show. Brielle's shoulders started shaking. She yanked her hand away from Darius, ripping her veil loose. "You used me," she cried. "You used her. You promised me a dream, and you don't even have the money to pay for the room." She turned and ran off the stage, her dress catching on a chair for a second before she stumbled free. Darius reached for her, but she slapped his hand away without even looking back. And for the first time, he looked small. Not because I made him small, because the truth always does that to people who live on lies. I closed my briefcase, the locks clicking shut like the end of a chapter. Malcolm touched my elbow gently. "Let's go," he murmured. Tasha stayed close on my other side. As we walked out through the same service door, the music didn't follow us. The shouting didn't follow us. The mess stayed behind in that ballroom where it belonged. Outside, the afternoon sun hit my face, warm and simple. I breathed in, deep, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I wasn't carrying someone else's life on my back. If you've been listening this far, tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up in that room, or would you have walked away quietly and let the lie collapse on its own? 2 weeks after the ballroom went silent, my life got quieter in a different way. Not the kind of quiet that comes from loneliness, the kind that comes from not being chased anymore. Malcolm called me on a Tuesday morning while I was folding laundry at my kitchen table. The sunlight was slanting through the blinds, and my cat was stretched out on the warm spot near the window like he owned the place. "Imani," Malcolm said, calm as always. The court issued the enforcement order. I sat down slowly. "So it's real?" "It's real," he confirmed. "Darius has 15 days to return the $75,000 in marital funds, plus cover additional costs tied to the hotel contract. If he doesn't pay, we move to seizure options: his car, other assets, whatever the court allows." For a moment, I just held the phone and let the words settle, not because I felt triumphant, but because my body was finally learning a new truth. I didn't have to beg for fairness. I could document it. I could demand it. I could get it. I thanked Malcolm, hung up, and sat there listening to the hum of my refrigerator. It's funny people expect a big victory moment, a celebration, champagne. What I felt was simpler. I felt my shoulders drop, like I'd been walking around with a heavy bag for years, and someone finally took it out of my hands. The neighborhood news traveled fast after that. It always does. Charlotte is a city, but it can still feel like a small town when people start talking. I heard that Darius sold the car, somebody said, for a little over 12 grand, just to start paying what he owed. I heard the business dried up fast once clients saw him differently. A man can fake success for a long time, but once trust breaks, it breaks loud. One of Tasha's friends saw him at a discount grocery store on the edge of town, standing in front of a produce bin like he couldn't decide if apples were worth it anymore. He used to buy steaks without blinking. Now he was calculating cabbage. Brielle disappeared the way she came, in quick, dramatic, and without a backward look. A friend of a friend said she took a job back in her hometown, stocking shelves in a supermarket. No ring. No designer dress. Just regular life. And you know what? I didn't hate her. I didn't love her either. I just understood something I hadn't before. When you build your future on someone else's money, you're always one truth away from losing everything. Loretta and Keisha didn't come around my house again. Not after the police word got spoken out loud. Not after the ballroom. Not after everybody saw what kind of family they were when they didn't get their way. I heard they started turning on each other. Keisha blaming Loretta. Loretta blaming Keisha. Two women who had been so comfortable pointing their anger at me, suddenly forced to sit with the mess they helped make. I didn't celebrate that. I just kept moving, because while they were stuck in circles, my life was finally going forward. I started working at Marlene Jackson's organic market in South End the next Monday after everything blew up. The first morning I arrived early, the air smelled like damp earth and fresh herbs. Marlene handed me a clipboard and said, "Inventory first." Then well-talk ordering. And something inside me softened again, not into weakness, but into relief. I was good at this. I was good at numbers, good at keeping track, good at making something steady. Customers started recognizing me. Older folks who came in for greens and sweet potatoes, who liked to talk while I rang them up. One man told me I reminded him of his sister. One woman said, "Baby, you've got a calm spirit," and I almost laughed because she didn't know what that calm cost me. At night, I'd come home tired in a clean way. Not tired from being drained by someone else's chaos, just tired from honest work. I'd heat up soup, sit at my small table, and my cat would curl up near my feet like a quiet little guardian. Some evenings I'd play old R&B on low volume and let the music fill the rooms where shouting used to live. And in that soft quiet, I realized the biggest win wasn't humiliating Darius in a ballroom. The biggest win was waking up and not bracing for him, not fearing a knock at the door, not checking my phone with dread, just breathing. I used to think divorce was the end of my story. But it wasn't. It was the moment the story finally belonged to me. And I'll leave you with one question I still ask myself sometimes, when the store is quiet and the evening light is fading: if he came back tomorrow really humbled, really broke, really sorry, would I even recognize him? Or would I recognize the trap? Tell me what you think. Would you forgive a man like that? Or would you keep your peace and never look back? And before you go, thank you for spending your time with me. If this story moved you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment with your take and the city or state you're listening from, because I read them. And if you want to support this channel, tapping the like button helps more than you know. It tells YouTube to share stories like this with people who might need them. When you're ready, click one of the videos on the end screen, and I'll meet you there.